So the questions have all been coming this way. So I want to start with a question going that way. And it's a really simple one. There is no right or wrong answer. It's a matter of opinion. What one word would you use to sum up what you think is a trait of a great leader? Anybody, free for all. Courage, did you say? That's a great word. Who else? Integrity. Who said that? Over here, integrity. What else? Say it again. Visionary. Great terms for leaders, all of those, but as you heard from Brent, I'm going to talk about something a little bit different. And that is what I believe is one of the most underutilized yet most essential elements of leadership, and that's hope. Take a look at this picture. You probably recognize this from earlier this summer, right? This is the soccer team that was rescued from that cave that was underwater in Thailand. But what you may not know is that the head of the Thai Navy SEALs said that hope was all they had to work with. And a BBC reporter who was covering that story end to end said it was an example of hope in action. And yet we all say, and I bet you've probably said this, hope is not a strategy or hope is not a plan, right? Anybody ever uttered that phrase? Well, I want to explain why I believe just the opposite, that hope is in fact a strategy and a plan. Not to say that you shouldn't have business models and plans, obviously you should. But when you understand the science of hopefulness, and there is one, then you will see that hope is in fact something that you can infuse in the workplace. Hope is about having a future-focused vision that as leaders you bring to life for others. And certainly your founder had that in spades. Look at when he founded the company way back in 1968, he started within 1 year a pension plan. And Carmen, where are you, Carmen? Just mentioned that you've got a very well-funded plan. That's not by happenstance. That was by design, by someone who was all of those things you said, a visionary, forward-thinking. He was looking at how do I take care of my associates for the long term. He wasn't thinking short term. He was thinking about success way down the road. And then he founded your pension plan along with the profit sharing just a few years later. So he was setting up a vision for the future, even though not everybody probably thought of it at that time as this is the way we pave the way for others. And that's exactly what hope does for your associates. And I'll talk a little bit more about how you can do that and what the strategies are, but you touched on your new campus today. That's an example of legacy for planning for the future living on. As you're looking at the space planning, and I'm sure there's a who gets what space decision still to come. I do not envy you that one. But it's an example of taking the best of the past, the legacy that you were founded on, and building that bridge, literally in this case, that bridge, that campus of the future. And that's an example of future-focused thinking. Now, the trick is, of course, to take your associates with you on that journey. You all know about the changes that are happening. You've been talking about this for a long time. Some of that conversation is much newer to them. So that's what we're going to talk about today is how do you bring them with you? Because as you heard, there's resistance to change always, but there are ways around that. And you know that you have to, Ed said, success is the barrier. What did you call that? That was a great phrase. Success, because it's easy, when you're a successful company like you all are, it's easy to say, you know, nothing's broken. Let's keep doing what we do. But in fact, what worked for you in the past, even what's working for you today, is not necessarily going to work for you in the future. I mean, look at these companies that we all grew up with, that were around, you know, kind of the too big to fail, but now they're gone or on life support, which is just another argument for innovation. And you've got your teams. It was so interesting hearing about your labs and your teams that are working on all the things that are happening in mobility. The hardest part is changing mindsets, taking people with you. I'll give you a little demonstration of what I mean, because you see this, as human beings, we tend to dig in. We stay where we are. We fight for the status quo, even when we think we're moving forward. That's human nature. We put our heads in the sand and we stay there. So I'll show you what I mean. Just do this right now where you're sitting. Just clasp your hands together and see which thumb is on top. And I want to see how the room splits here. I've got my left thumb on top. So raise your hand if you're a left thumb on top person. Okay, now right thumb on top. It's about 50-50. I'd say that was pretty right on 50-50. Now try it the other way, and you might have seen that. That's a little speaker trick. Try that and see how, it doesn't feel quite right? But you can do it. But because this is the leadership team here, we're going to up the ante. So I want you to cross your arms. Okay, now see, I put my left thumb on top, but I put my right arm on top, so there's no correlation between the two. And it's not about hand dominance, or we'd be about 90-10. Lefties are always out of luck, right? Lefties in the room. Another space planning issue because everything's on the wrong side. The lamp, the desk, your return, your computer, your phone, right? You're one of those, you know. Yep. All right, so now let's try this. You know what's coming, right? Cross your arms the other way. Just see how, it's not tucking in there, is it? Suddenly we're all doing the Macarena here, trying to get our arms to tuck in. So let's see how we do. I was right arm on top. Let's see how we split here. Right arm's on top, okay. Now those of you who had your left, maybe 60, about 50-50. Okay, put it back the way it was comfortably. Whew. And now just look over at your neighbor, see if they're doing it right. Yeah, well, some of you are, some of you. So here's what this means. Really nothing, except this one thing. This was a preference you chose when you were about 3 years old. And that's the way you do it, and that's the way you're always going to do it. But here's the thing. Half of the world feels just as strongly about doing it the other way. That's when you're talking about those everyday risks. That's how hardwired we are to our own opinion, to our own behaviors and habits, to our own ways of doing things. We don't want to let go. It doesn't feel right to us. But if you're going to move to the next level, it's all about noticing those subtle differences, which you all as leaders are more in tune to, but you've got to notice for everyone on your teams, all of your associates, and get them there with you. But if you know a little bit about why we resist change, it's a lot easier to get to the how we can make change happen. So here are some of the reasons that we resist. The first one is just plain old biological hardwiring, right? We're fight or flight driven. You know, as soon as we perceive something that's dangerous, and our amygdalas of our brains, the most primitive part of our brain that is the least changed over centuries of development, is our fear center. And when something is new, it can be danger or it can be simply perceived danger. That's how we're wired, with negativity bias, because as animals, as mammals, we don't have claws and we can't run like a cheetah. We've got to be scanning the world for problems. And that comes up as negativity and results in that sort of fight, flight, or the other one that people forget is freeze mentality. So that's how we're wired. Change comes up and this part of us, it's that knee-jerk resistance. Fear of the unknown. This is the biggest issue for your associates, whether they put their fingers on this or not. It's that sense of ambiguity, that uncertainty, that overwhelm. What's happening out there? We hear about change, but we don't know what that means. So there's this stirring of emotion sort of right under the surface of something's going to happen and I can't quite put my finger on it. Well, welcome to the new age, right? The ambiguity is never going away. That is something we have to learn to embrace and, believe it or not, get people excited about. That change means opportunity for massive growth. It's not a bad thing, it's an opportunity. Easy to say, hard to do, but that's the challenge of leadership. Another one is just a basic lack of understanding and communication. And you probably feel like you've been talking about change and what's happening and what might happen next forever. But when you've said it 1,000 times, your associates have heard it 1 time. You cannot underestimate how often you need to repeat things. If you remember the old days when we had record albums, anybody? It's like a broken record. You say it so often until you think you can't say it again, and other people are just starting to internalize it. It's really that critical. And of course, connecting the benefit of the change to the change itself. So people don't feel like, here we go again, or another change, we're doing it again. You've got to connect the dots for them so that they see where the change is meant to take them and why this particular change is different from another one or the last one. And then beyond that is to paint that picture of the future that people really can embrace and get excited about. There's a funny thing that happens, this sort of internal sense, almost a betrayal, where we feel like, wait a minute, I've been here a long time and things have really worked well and I've been well trained, but now we're going in this different direction. There's a sense of, was my training not serving me? Did my old manager, should I just abandon those things? And it's not about that. It's about connecting your legacy, the best of everything about the company, and bridging that to the future. I mean, not a problem in this organization. There are lots who would like to forget their past and bury it and move on. But you can't negate history. In your case, it happens to be a fabulous history, but it's about the evolution so that people don't feel disloyal about whatever they've learned or whoever they've served in the past. Finally, and this is a very real thing that most people have thought about, am I going to cut it in this brave new world? Do I have the skills? Do I have the training? Do I have the future focus to be able to take on whatever's next? But your group up here touched on this, and it's so important that looking at people across that sort of lattice organization is really critical, because the rock stars of tomorrow are the ones who are the lifelong learners. That is the currency. It is not, I firmly believe what Carmen said, it is not the people who walk in the door with yesterday's resume. It's the people who can adapt, who can change, who can grow, who you can drop in like a soldier in the field to different units, and they're going to figure it out. Those are the employees you want to be looking for and embracing.